Hey everybody, welcome to All About the Game. My name is Todd Blyleven and I'm joined by my co-host, Mike Micucci. I had a chance to run around at the major league level as a kid, following my dad, Bert Blyleven, around for just about 16 years until I got into high school and started playing myself. I became a pro player and then became a major league scout for another 8 years working with the Angels and the Rockies. I've been in the corporate sports world, working with global product brands and event companies since then, and been coaching for about 25 years and worked with players from the big league level down. Really excited to be here and just talk baseball with you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. I'm Mike Micucci. For the last 25 years, I've been in professional baseball, both as a player, manager, coach, at various different levels. I've been with the Chicago Cubs, Texas Rangers, Angels, and the Seattle Mariners. I've really enjoyed my time in player development, both, as a manager, coordinator, and a director. Just great to talk about the game, be around the kids and watch them grow and develop. So now we're just moving on to the private sector and starting my own baseball school or baseball academy, as you call it. So this is going to be a great show.
Yeah, and for all those in the North Texas area, Mike Micucci baseball.com. He does lessons. Dylan's working with you, and that's how we kind of started our relationship. Was I needed a really good hitting instructor, somebody that could get down into the weeds with some of the things that Dylan was doing. My 16-year-old son, that's a switch hitting catcher, and he's never really had catching instruction formally, other than some coaches out in Southern California that he worked with. And we were just blown away with your professionalism and how quick you were able to identify. And coming from a scout's perspective and someone that's been in the game my whole life, I just loved what you were able to do with Dylan, and he connected right away. So if you're in the North Texas area, you got to look up Mike Micucci baseball.com. You're doing it over at Jason Jennings' place at the ACES facility.
Yeah, right there at Pastime Training Center here in Frisco, Texas. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, that's great. So today we're bringing on one of my favorite people, my dad, Bert Blyleven, Hall of Fame inductee 2011. We'll go through his stats later, but this guy's been around for at the major league level, played for 23 years, is still an announcer with the Minnesota Twins, and does the color commentating. He's a great speaker, great guy, and was a great dad. So
yeah, Todd, I got to tell you, I'm like a kid at Christmas time. I've been looking forward to this, and I love talking baseball and with guys that have been, Hall of Fame guys that have done it, like your dad's done it, and a long time and different eras. I think is so intriguing, how he probably broke in as a 19-year-old kid, in the 70s and then finishes up in the 90s, and how the game's evolved and how he's had to deal with that. We're watching a different game than it was back in the 90s. So this is like Christmas time to just be able to talk baseball with somebody of that kind of knowledge. So I'm really excited about today's show.
I am too. And, I think this is why you and I decided to do this. I think when we dive into our phone book or our phone book, our phones, and you look at all the people that we have had conversations with, we have friendships with in different industries. I think this gives a platform to bring some of these really cool people on and share their story, talk about what's relevant in today's game with COVID updates and MLB news, but really just talking baseball. So I'm excited about this show too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just we're not just gonna cover major league stuff either. We're gonna cover youth baseball and the tournaments and what recruiting looks like, how to get yourself noticed for coaches and for scouts. So there's a lot of, parents can hop on here. There's going to be a lot of good information.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm excited to have, I want to pull some of those stories out from my dad today that are just entertaining. And maybe we'll get a chance to see if he can show us, what that breaking ball looks like.
Yeah, that would be a treat.
Well, I know he's on hold, so we're going to go ahead and bring him on if you're ready. On a count of three, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, my dad, Bert Blyleven. Thanks for being on, Dad. This is really exciting. It's our first podcast. Mike and I, we just started toying around with this idea a couple weeks ago and thought, we're talking baseball. So, for those listening and watching, I thought I'd just kind of briefly show, just who my dad is. Was inducted in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame in 2011, which we were honored to be there and watch him go through that amazing moment. And we'll talk about that later. And then you look at the career stats on what he was able to accomplish in 692 games at the Major League level. He pitched 4,970 innings, 287 wins, a whip percentage of 1.198, an overall ERA of 3.31 in 692 games, which is, I think, amazing. And then obviously 3,701 strikeouts, 242 complete games, and obviously 60 shutouts, which is an incredible milestone.
Well, I'm glad I pitched. I'm glad I pitched in an era when men were men. The game today is different, but we'll go into that a little bit. But no, it was a lot of fun, and raising 4 kids, and now a couple more that I remarried, and now 9 grandkids. Life's been good, been very, very good.
In this show, what we wanted to try to do was really touch on a lot of different aspects of the game. From the Major League news to the amateur that's coming out of the homes now. We're right. States are starting to reopen with COVID, and people are trying to figure out what that means, especially with their own kids. Dylan, he's 16 and wants to play summer ball, but how do we make that safe for him and create an environment where he can go showcase his skills in front of colleges. Colleges are trying to figure out where they're going to go, what players, and then you got the MLB news, which I thought we could start with. What's the latest you're hearing with MLB right now, and them wanting to start up?
Well, Mike and Todd, I think, what we're reading is hopefully baseball can be back on the field on TV the 4th of July weekend. That's the latest right now. They're going to supposedly have 3 divisions, an East Division, Central Division, and a Western Division with 10 teams in each division. Play about 80 to 82 ball games. More of the games, say the Minnesota Twins, who I still broadcast for, would play a majority of the 80 to 82 games in their division. So you could kind of get a division winner that would go to postseason. They're going to add a couple more wild card teams, and then the World Series eventually, they hope probably late October. They'll be playing baseball into October. And then, in World Series, maybe the first part of November. Might even be a neutral stadium to where they play the World Series, kind of what the NFL does with the Super Bowl. So, curious. I'm excited, Mike, about, these guys getting back on the field and helping a lot of people enjoy what we've gone through, the terrible times of the virus, and my prayers, I know all our prayers go out to everybody who's been affected by this nasty virus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, sports has always been something that kind of unifies our country, and you go back throughout the times, and the most recent of 2000, 9/11 and what, baseball was able to do for the country back then. So really looking forward to the season getting started. That being said, we're in a pretty tight window here. If we don't get some sort of agreement here pretty soon, it's going to be hard to have any season, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. But I think the biggest thing for the players is their safety. Hey, the doctors, the nurses, the first responders, they've given up a lot to get through this virus. And I think we're at a point, and hopefully by, say, in a couple of weeks, that they can make some type of announcement to where the players will feel safe going to the ballpark, maybe playing games without fans. That's okay. Hey, I spent 5 years in Cleveland. There was never any fans there in Cleveland. What the heck? So you could hear the peanut vendors, saying, hey, get your beer here. And I'm out on the mountain going, boy, time out. I'd like to have a couple, please. You know, it's just that's the way it is right now. That's what we're in. So let's just enjoy it. Hopefully the players will get back on the field so people can turn on their TV and watch the Minnesota Twins play the Chicago White Sox or whatever your favorite team is.
Right.
Yeah, and that segues into the MLB amateur draft too, and how that's been affected. I mean, I know the MLB players and their families. Obviously, we want everybody to be safe, and we want baseball. We want those bombers to fly over those stadiums, and we want those chills, and we want the American anthem to be played, and see those players in the uniforms. But you're talking about the minor league players that are affected. And what their seasons are lost, and then the MLB draft and all these high school seniors and college players that are affected, from the 6th round down. You're talking about 300 plus players in that 6th round to 10 round range. That these kids were signable. They were, this is what they've geared up for their entire lives, is to get that opportunity, get that phone call, and it's gone.
Well, you know what, and I don't mean to be on the downside, but it's the situation we're put into now. And both you guys being scouts and being around the game a long time, that the talent is out there.
Right.
Whether you're a high school or a college kid, you've been scouted. I don't care if you live in Timbuktu. If you're good, they find you. In this draft, I know what I understand and what I read, it's not going to be the 50 rounds. It's going to be, 5-10 rounds. These kids have decisions to make. If you're out of high school, do you want to take that scholarship and continue your career in college? But do you want to try to play pro ball right away? So I think, the top kids will get drafted and they'll get an opportunity to play pro ball. It doesn't mean that they're going to get to the big leagues. It's tough. About 4% of everybody that's signed end up getting to the big leagues. Think about that. That's a difficult place to get. And once you're there, you stay there for 22 years like I did.
Yeah, I mean, that's the dream. That's every kid's dream, right? Is to when you're 7, 8 years old and you go out in the field up until you get in high school and you're pretty good, is to try to reach as far as you can get. And that kind of, when you talk about even the college recruiting play and those kids going on to school and those decisions that have to be made, even the college recruiters now are being affected by this. They extended the dead period to May 31st. College coaches, I talk to them almost weekly now. Some of my really good friends at Division I schools, and they're just trying to figure out where they're going to go, what states are opening, what fields are opening, how they're going to be able to see these players. And then really it's the juniors that were on the brink of their rise, were really affected by this, and the seniors that, a kid like Josh Hernandez that pitched with Dylan. Here's a kid that right-hander, touching 93, touching 94, going to Texas State. But could this kid have had a chance to be in that draft around that 8, 9, 10 round range? Who knows? But everybody's affected by it. We just got to make the best of it. So,
I think too, when you think about, just how everything gets trickled down, it's affecting the recruiting class. If you're a freshman and you go somewhere, you've been told probably have to sit for a year. This guy's going to sign, and then you're going to wind up playing, and all of a sudden he's not signing. They're not leaving. You're stuck. There's the transfer rules get changed this year a little bit. Kids in college are thinking of transferring to different schools. So the kids that are going to all the tournaments and playing, are they even, in some of these states, are they even going to be allowed to play, if you're 16, 15, the 14 U's, the 15 U's, can they even play? Or is it just the seniors are going to be allowed to play? It's going to be really, very interesting to see what happens here in the next couple of weeks.
Hopefully people will do the social distancing and continue with a mask if need be and all that stuff. And, I pray to the good Lord that everybody out there, we're talking baseball, there's a lot of people looking for jobs. It's just a different time in our lives now, and we're affected, everybody's affected by this virus.
Dad, you went through, a couple strikes. I know you and I were talking a little bit. Share kind of your story on as that happened. And, now Mike and I talked about this a little bit. When you're a pro athlete, your spring training date starts February 29th. You kind of have this mindset of, okay, January 1st, I'm going to start doing this. February 1, I'm going to be at this percentage. How do you prepare yourself if you're in today's Dylan's shoes, getting ready in 2 weeks' time, the bell's going to ring. They're going to be playing in tournaments, possibly. The pro player shoes. How do you prepare yourself mentally and physically to start getting back into it?
If you love what you do, you prepare for it. My first lockout strike was in 1972. I went all the way through the 1991, where spring training was cut short about 3 weeks. I think we were ready. But I went through every one except, thank goodness, not 1994, where there was no World Series played that year. But it's part of the union. It's part of what baseball created back in the late 60s when they hired Marvin Miller as their executive director for the Players Association to get the salary schedule up. But current day players, I guarantee you, there's guys out there for the Minnesota Twins, pitchers are throwing somewhere. You can throw against a wall. You can get that arm strength. In 1981, I was with the Cleveland Indians. We started the season. We played about 2 months, and then it was shut down. We had a lockout strike, and we resumed about 2 months later. And my first outing, I went 9 innings. I was ready. I made sure that I threw batting practice to high school kids wherever I could find it. But in today's game, with the virus that's going on, it's hard to get those kids back on the field and, have that opportunity made us but these kids are bigger and stronger. I know that when we played in the 70s and 80s, there's so many great things that they can do now, not the analytic part, but just going out and getting yourself physically ready. I was a runner. I was a distance runner. I made sure, and throughout my career, I never had issues from the waist down. That was my foundation. No matter what sport you play out there, kids, basketball, football, whatever, golf, you have to be strong from the waist down. My arm was nothing to me more than a whip. The elasticity of my arm created the fastball, created the curveball, the changeup. But what it came down to is my push off the mound, my strength, my leg strength to allow my arm to catch up to my body and to throw strikes. So right now in this time, get your butt out there if you're a major league player and work your tail end off. And hopefully when the bell rings again, that you're ready. You're 95 to 100% ready to face a major league hitter. Hitters won't take that long to get ready. They could hit anywhere off a tee. They can go anywhere. Pitcher's going to take a little bit longer. I think once Major League Baseball decides and the Players Association and the health department decide that it's time for these guys to go back and have a short spring training and then start the season, that you have to be ready. And, if you're not, it's your fault. It's your fault. And believe me, guys are speaking out now. They don't want to go back because of the virus. Hey, the doctors, the nurses, all these people, the first responders, a lot of them have given up their lives to make sure that, we stay healthy. And I think it's up to major league players and the owners to get the players back on the field. So these people out there that have been affected by this have something to look forward to. And that's what sports brings. And Mike, you touched on that earlier.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you made that point too about how your lower half and your legs were your foundation, and everything that you do. It's funny, Todd and I were talking about it the other day, but the facility that we're at over the past time here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, kids are starting to everything's opening up. They're talking about having tournaments here mid-June, and kids are starting to really start to kind of come back to the facility, and they all want to hit. They all, love to lift weights. They're talking about their diet or whatever. But what they don't like to do is they don't like to run. The running, the agility, the sprint work, all the footwork stuff that they need to be in shape. To me, the two biggest things that you worry about with short spring training, or even a kid, like Dylan that's trying to get ready in a short period of time is their legs have to be in shape, and their arm has to be in shape. Everything else, the timing, when you're in the batter's box, we talked about it a little bit the other day. Your timing's going to be off as a hitter. You'll get that. You're going to need some at bat. You're going to need to see pitching. Your pitch recognition is probably going to be down a little bit. But again, that'll start to come back. If you're a pitcher, we were talking the other day, if I'm watching a pitcher on the mound, I'm looking for a good delivery, good arm action, but the shape of the pitches might not be as sharp. The overall control of command when they first start playing might not be there, but that'll come. But if their legs aren't in shape and their arms aren't in shape, you're really putting players at risk.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that, I went 9 innings after the 2 months off, but I made sure that my foundation was strong. And you know what, there's things that a lot of kids have talent, okay? What's in their side, their heart, that's also very important. Are they able to dedicate themselves to get to that next level? And believe me, I played for 22 years. There's a lot of levels that you have to get to be able to play. From 19 years old to 41 years old, your body's not the same, but you got to realize that everybody's body's different and you have to find what works for you. We didn't have weights like, back in the 70s. We had maybe dumbbells in the training room and nobody wanted to go in the training room. It was off limits because we were playing year to year as far as our contract. You couldn't get hurt. You couldn't miss a start, or that would affect your negotiations for next year. But now that they have the weights and the conditioning and all these gurus that know how to get you as an individual into the best shape you can be, now it's up to you to take that information and be the person you want to be. There's a lot of kids that have talent, but do they have the heart? Do they have the desire to want to go out there and be that guy that, in high school, I wasn't very good. I wasn't very good in high school. I was, between my junior and senior year, I developed control of my fastball. I used to throw against a block wall all the time. Just the visualization of throwing a pitch. But I knew that I ran cross country in high school. I knew playing basketball, that helped me run cross country, and playing baseball. I had a great foundation, and it got me to the big leagues at a very young age.
Hey, Dad, so one of the things I thought would be really interesting and, to talk about is when you were a kid, and playing Little League, and maybe take us through just, when you really started to learn the game of baseball. I know, you came over from Holland and, all your brothers and sisters and stuff, but when did you really start to figure out that you were pretty good and wanted to start putting more effort into it? I mean, you delivered papers and you worked at Orange Julius, I think it was. And, I think your journey was just really cool on how you developed through your junior, senior year. Might be interesting.
Well, we all have heroes in life, and my hero is my mom and dad. To leave Holland with really $72 when they got into Canada that they were going to get from the Canadian government with 3 kids. And then we lived in Canada for 4 years, and my dad went ahead and came to the United States because my uncle, his brother, lived in Southern California. We didn't know anything about baseball. My dad didn't, but he became a great Dodger fan. And my pops, when after work, he was a bumper straightener, straightening out about bumpers. So he's a pretty strong man, and I got some knots in my head to show it. But, he expected all of us, all my 2 brothers, my 4 sisters, to get out there and do the best you can. We never watched TV. We didn't play video games back then, of course, but we were always outside. Get out of the house, basically. That's what they said. Go do something. I had a paper out when I was 11 years old. I carried that all the way through high school. I did work at Orange Julius. I worked at McDonald's. You did whatever you had to do to help, and some of that money went to my mom and dad to help pay for food on the table and all that stuff. So, but my dad was always there. He'd work 8 hours of straightening bumpers, and I wanted to play catch. He'd play catch with me. My older brother, Frank, was more of a swimmer. He didn't play baseball. So And then when I started throwing harder, maybe about 14 or 15, he built me a mound in the backyard. We had horseshoe pits in the backyard, and he built a screen on one side of the horseshoe pit and a mound on the other side, and had a bucket of balls and put a tarp down with the strike zone. And I would, just throw against there. Always playing baseball, whether I was playing running cross country or basketball, I always was throwing that baseball. And we didn't have the pitch count back then. The hitters let us know when we were done. And sometimes too soon, sometimes in the first inning, we were going, wait, I'm not done. I only threw 5 pitches and I'm already out. What the hell? But you know what? I don't think I was a good player until between my junior and senior year. I played in Lakewood High School. They had a scout league. Jesse Flores, the scout who signed me in 1969 out of San Diego High School. And then Dick Winsick, a former pitcher for the Dodgers. He would come out on weekends. We talked about the control, all that stuff. So my mind was always working. I always picked apart other pitchers. I watched. My dad was a huge Dodger fan. He loved Frank Howard. And I got to tell this story, Todd, because I know you've probably heard it. Maybe some of the viewers haven't. But my first major league game was in Washington, D.C., 1970, early June. And Frank Howard was in the lineup. Ted Williams was the manager of the Senators back then. I was with the Minnesota Twins. My first major league game, my first hitter I ever faced was a guy named Lee May, left-handed hitter. I got to count the ball to 3-2. We scored a run in the first inning, so I had a 1-0 lead. My sixth pitch of that inning was a fastball away, a 3-2 pitch to Lee May, and he hit it over the right field fence for a home run, which tied the game. But my first major league hitter, 19 years old, took me deep. And again, who batted third in that lineup was Frank Howard. And Frank Howard, if you look back at how big a man he was, and as Lee May was rounding the bases, I thought, oh my goodness, if Lee May, who stood about 6'1", hits a ball that far, how far is Frank Howard going to hit one that stood at 6'8", But we ended up winning 2-1 is the only run that I allowed. I went 7 innings. I remember that line score, 5 hits, I think 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. Ron Peranowski picked up the save the last 2 innings, not like relievers today. He went 2 innings to pick up the save, and I won 2-1. Well, we didn't have the cell phones back then. You got to wait till after the ball game to call mom and dad, which I did right as soon as I got into my hotel room. And they already had heard that I won my first major league game. So I'm talking to my mother in her Dutch accent, and all of a sudden my dad gets on the phone, and again, he loved Frank Howard, just the big big man. So finally we're talking a little bit. He said, congratulations in his Dutch accent, and we're talking a little bit. And finally he says, well, son, how did Frank Howard do against you? I said, Dad, 0 for 3, and I struck him out once. Dad, he hung up on me. He wanted Frank Howard to take me deep. But then it just so many great memories playing a game of baseball. So many great people that I watched. But Todd, you asked me how did you feel that, or when did you think you could pitch at the major league level? I really didn't. I just went about playing the game, and I guess other people, scouts, executives, front office personnel, the managers, Bill Rigney saw me in spring training. He liked what he saw, and I got that opportunity. So I never looked at I was special. I just played the game of baseball, which I loved, and I still love it today, doing some broadcasting for the Twins. So it's great to be around the game. But one thing, too, when I came up, I had Jim Perry, Jim Cott in the starting rotation of the Minnesota Twins. 1970, Jim Perry won the Cy Young, winning 24 ball games. Jim Cott, a fellow Dutchman. And again, I'm 19 years old. They're veterans. So they kind of took me in as a younger brother, and they kind of showed me the way. And then both of them suggested that between my starts, when I wasn't pitching, go out to the bullpen, watch us warm up. What did they do? So I went out there and I watched. But at the old Metropolitan Stadium where the Mall of America is today in Minnesota, there was 2 mounds. There's the home mound and the visiting mound, which is like 20 feet away. So not only got to watch these guys warm up before a ball game, I got to watch, Catfish Hunter, Mike Cuellar, Jim Palmer. I got to see what their routine was. And I always watched pitchers that had a lot of success. What did they do to the program? I loved watching Nolan Ryan prepare for a ball game, what he did, and the way he went about his business. Guys that played for so long, 20 plus years, Tommy John, guys, to me, Jim Cott, Tommy John should be in the Hall of Fame. Great numbers, but they're not in yet. But you know what? You never quit learning the game of baseball. If you're a high school kid or a little leaguer and you're good, you're the best on your team, that's fine. But believe me, you get drafted, you go to Melbourne, Florida, wherever you're at, guess what? You're not the best kid anymore. There's a lot of kids out there that are just as talented as you. And I said earlier, you got the heart, the desire, the will to bust your butt and never quit learning.
So interesting that you mentioned that. Being a field coordinator for a couple different organizations, all the percentages kind of the kids that make it to the big leagues. And everybody that sits in front of you all has that aspiration to make it to the big leagues. I always felt like our jobs were to not only develop them as players, but to develop them as men so they could be successful, in anything they did in life. And we spent a lot of time building their characters. I know with the Rangers and the Angels in Seattle, most in particular, we spent a lot of time with the kids from the Dominican all the way up until, they get to the big leagues. You spend a lot of time with their character.
A funny story, when I was 18 years old, I was in rookie ball. Fred Waters, an old-time manager, a left-handed pitcher, a little bit in the minor leagues, but he was our manager. Of course, we're high school kids. We were throwing the ball all over the place. Pitchers, we were not even in the strike zone. He finally got us all in the clubhouse. There might have been 30 of us. And he said, and every other word sad to say was a cuss word in his vocabulary. He said, just look around the room, boys. You'll be lucky if two of you ever get to the big leagues. Of course, you're sitting in front of your locker, you're going, ooh, looking around saying, I wonder who the other one is.
Yeah, who's the other guy?
Yeah, and believe it or not, there was only 2. Myself and my good friend still today, Jim Hughes, both pitchers. We were the only 2 that out of that group that made it. And I remember when I got drafted, of course, rookie ball, you get sent down, and some of course, college kids aren't going to go to rookie ball. They're going to go to a higher single A. And in 1969, 3 players came down because the draft, and they had a roster. Then they sent them back to rookie ball for the 2nd straight year, and all 3 of them were singing together, please release me, let me go, right? Well, Fred Waters heard that. Within a week, all 3 of those guys were released. You didn't need that. You want to be released, you want to go home. But to play baseball, you have to be dedicated. You have to realize that, your family life, this has to be put on hold. You have a job to do to help support your family, and you better give it 100%.
Mike runs a catching program too that he's launching at Mike Micucci baseball.com, and we'll have more info on that as the shows start to progress, and we'll dive a lot more into that. But his knowledge on the game and calling a game, it's old school, which I really love, because those are the stories I always heard from you and watching the greats. I mean, I got a chance to sit there and watch the Nolan Ryans and Jim Palmers warm up next to you. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, Dad, was, and I was asked by one of our followers, is what does it feel like to toe up on the rubber the very first time in a World Series game when you have all that noise around you and just the excitement? What's that feel like? Just the emotional part of it.
That's why you play the game. I always felt stress was nothing more than you put on yourself. That's kind of the way I kind of went about business. I knew if I was in good shape, and mentally, physically, I was fine. I was going to be successful. My postseason record speaks for itself. I pitched very good. My first one in 1979, Game 2 against Jim Palmer in Baltimore. Went extra innings. Both of us got no decisions, but we ended up winning that ball game. We ended up winning the World Series in 1979 with the Pirates. I pitched in Game 5 after Jim Rooker pitched 5 great innings. Excuse me. We were down 1-0. We had to win. We were down 3-1 to the Orioles. I pitched 4 shutout innings. Our offense came alive thanks to Willie Stargell and Dave Parker and that crew. And we ended up winning that ball game, going back to Baltimore, winning the final 2, jumping on Willie Stargell's back. 1987, I started Game 2 and Game 5 for the Twins in World Series, and we ended up winning that ball game. It was a lot of fun. That's what you play the game for, to get to the ultimate high, and that would be in the World Series of baseball. Just like whatever job you do, maybe you have to start at the totem pole, the bottom up, but you want to work your way up. And it takes time. It takes dedication. It takes a lot of extra energy inside to get the best out of yourself, no matter what you do in life.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to our very first show, part 1 of a 2-part series with Bert Blyleven. Don't miss out tomorrow as we talk about the Bert Blyleven curveball and an interesting story with Jason Jennings. Thanks again, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow.